progress report. Good morning, John. Good to see you.
Hi, good morning, Sabrina, Chris, Jason, and Joser. Yeah, I was listening to the conversation all morning, and I know that Bill 112 is probably the bigger issue this week than other issues. But I was just telling Chris, I worked on this when I was in D.C. Boy, just a while ago, and every now and then it resurfaces, regionally, nationally, and it's part of what they call tort reform, which is efforts around the country to limit the amount that you can get in court from one of these types of issues. So when I worked on it, in the nation's capital, because it's in D.C., becomes such a big issue because it's got such a spotlight on it, and I didn't know what I was getting into, but sure enough, we had victims advocacy groups on one side, you had trial lawyers associations on the other side, the medical societies, the doctors, and it was such a controversial, very difficult issue because in reality you do have real situations where you need to address the issues that the victims of malpractice. On the other hand, what do you do about it when you're not talking about every doctor, you're talking about the bad doctors, and some of these approaches, I think as you heard from the doctors, may subject everybody to the same types of effects, whether it's exposure to lawsuits or false claims and so forth. And on the other hand, the trial lawyers, very powerful lobby in the around the country, they would take these cases on contingency fees. So if you were a victim or you claim to be a victim, you wouldn't have to put any money up front to go to court, and the lawyers would take a certain percentage if they won. And that's why you saw some of the judgments, those 10 million, 50 million judgments that made national news. So it's a really tough issue, and I don't envy the policymakers trying to figure out how to balance all of these competing items. So I have a lot of scar tissue from that. So.
Sounds like it. Well, on to education matters now, John. I know that you wanted to give an update on vaccination and also the vaccination mandate.
Yeah, so there was a lot of discussion I've heard, because I try to be transparent and let people know what the discussions are, just so that they're not surprised if decisions are made one way or the other. And I know that there were a lot of questions I was receiving because I mentioned that I had been in conversation with public health and with the governor regarding the possibility of a vaccine mandate. So that's really been one of the questions that have been raised this past week, because I told everybody that if there was going to be a decision, my recommendation was by July 8th, decide this so that we have a month to vaccinate the kids and the employees. So it turns out, with public health review of all the necessary information, including the legal side of things, their recommendation is that the mandate not be pursued at this point in time. And I think part of it, as I would have guessed, is that the vaccines that are currently being administered are still under emergency use authorization. So they're not yet fully approved by the FDA, and I think nobody really feels comfortable issuing a vaccine mandate in light of the fact that it's technically these vaccines are still going through the formal approval process. So for all those parents and school staff who were maybe interested or concerned about whether a mandate would be put in place, the answer is that there will not be a mandate. It will not be a requirement to get the vaccines, at least for the beginning of the school year, and maybe down the road, that conversation will come up again. So in that light, we still are pushing for our students, our eligible students, and our employees to take advantage of the vaccinations that are being offered. I think we're going to be pretty good on the school side. Every week we update the numbers, and it looks like we're getting close to 75% of our school employees who are fully vaccinated. And then, of course, with the students, it's a little bit slower because they started later. But we won't get the 80%, but we do know that the students are steadily, moving up the chart in terms of their fully vaccinated percentage. So we'll continue to track that, and we're working with public health as well as with our private partners like American Medical Center, GRMC, and so forth, to try to coordinate more vaccination opportunities, especially if we can do it, in the villages and, versus at the UOG Fieldhouse. So we're looking for those opportunities, and once we nail down those plans, we'll be able to share that with the community and try to accelerate the vaccination drive.
Right on. John, I wanted to ask, because I know it's kind of been a topic that's been in the news cycle and nationally, and I also watched a documentary, Changing the Game, and it was about transgender athletes, some of them in the school system. So I didn't know, and wanted to ask, is there a policy for transgender students participating in interscholastic sports, or any policies generally with the public school system in place?
Right now, there isn't a specific policy regarding transgender participation in activities, including sports activities. It's something that I will, let our ESA folks know to continue to monitor and give us, their recommendations. But even I would say nationally, internationally, this is such a fluid situation in terms of how how countries, how the Olympic Committee, how these big sports associations, the NCAA and so forth, are dealing with these types of questions. I think just last month, the president, through the U.S. Department of Education, issued guidance that based on, I guess, a recent Supreme Court decision, the guidance was to ensure that we were clear that Title IX protections extend to transgender individuals, including employees and including students, especially student athletes. So Title IX is an anti-discrimination law for federally funded institutions. And as a federally funded, we receive federal funds, we are required to abide by US DOE's guidance. And of course, that's guidance that really gets its teeth when there is a complaint filed, and then that goes to the Office of Civil Rights and so forth. But it's clear that during the Trump administration, that was not the position that the department took, and now we're being advised that there is a more extensive view of civil rights protections to include transgender athletes. In the past, when we've dealt with issues, not really in the sports arena, but I think you recall there was a discussion about transgender use of restroom facilities, right, and so forth. We've been able to deal with that on a case-by-case basis, and for us, trying to be as inclusive as possible. However, we've received a lot of conflicting messages at the federal level, so we were hoping to get more clarity on that end, but as you can guess, there isn't much more clarity yet since the last administration coming to this administration. I know a lot of states, and I think this is kind of where, not just the DOE, but our board and our senators, probably need to continue that open discussion, because we know that on Guam, we don't have any laws prohibiting, participation of transgendered individuals in, any activities that I'm aware of. But in other states, and you can guess, we could probably guess the states that are taking the lead on this, they're much more active in passing laws that prohibit transgender participation in school sports and other restrooms and so forth. And I think those are the situations where they're looking for a federal state kind of challenge, and hopefully we can learn what direction we're going to be headed as a country, and then make that decision on our own. So at this point, nothing really in writing. Usually when we with Guam and with situations that we can anticipate, sometimes we wait to kind of get a sense of what types of issues are coming our way, so that we can craft policy that addresses those issues. But we really haven't seen those come to the forefront on Guam, and I expect that we will at some point, and we should be prepared for it.
Do you have an update on the $287 million in ARP fund, the spending plan?
Yeah, so hopefully that'll be finalized this week. As I mentioned before, we were waiting for just final administrative guidance on the use of those funds. And so I think we have the guidance already, and we're just looking to do a final review and finalize the application to be sent in. So a lot of we're still working with ESF2 funds. As you can tell, I mean, these are huge amounts of funding support coming through the federal government. So we're still working to deploy those funds. The ARP funds are going to be more, long-term investments. So, they're not, there's no immediate need to free those funds up for most of the activities. But we just needed to wrap up some of these questions that were being asked so that we could finalize a good proposal. So I expect that those will be done this week. I just received kind of a final draft to review after our recent meeting with USDOE.
Right. Thank you, John. You good?
John, yeah.
Okay. Appreciate your time this morning.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Good talk.
Have a great week.
There you go. Jon Fernandez, GDOE Superintendent, 844. An announcement here. Hear ye. Notice of intent from the Department of Public Works announcing their intent to employ Miss Carol Rose M. Manuel as an Engineer 1 at pay grade L, Step 7 of $46,375 per annum. This announcement is in compliance with Public Law 28-112, Recruitment Above Step, Section 5, Transparency and Disclosure, Section 10, 6303.1. Should you require additional information, please contact the Human Resources Division of the Department of Public Works at 475-1128 or 1141. Vincent P. Areola, Director. 8:46, Thursday, July 8th. Let's go ahead and get into the news now, our in-depth 8 o'clock newscast, which is brought to you by Pacific Points with the very latest from the KUAM News Team. Sabrina Salas-Matanani, good morning.
Off a day for several hours. Testimony was received last night on Bill 112 at the Guam Congress Building. The main sponsor